These are the stories that make history come alive. The moments when real people did ridiculous things, when everything went hilariously wrong, or when the universe just decided to get weird. Welcome to History Crossroads, where the past is never truly buried. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more history. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let me tell you about 50 of the strangest things that actually happened in human history. 50, when Indiana almost broke math forever. It's 1897, and lawmakers in Indiana are sitting around thinking, you know what's really annoying? Pi. Apparently, some well-meaning but completely wrong math enthusiast convinced them that 3.14159 was just too complicated. His brilliant solution? Let's just make it 3.2 instead.
Gentlemen, this new value for pi will revolutionize our understanding of the circle, making calculations simpler and more intuitive for all Hoosiers.
The Indiana House of Representatives actually passed this bill unanimously. They were literally about to make it illegal for pi to be anything other than 3.2 in their state. Thank goodness a visiting math professor happened to be there and basically said, "Guys, you can't just vote on what numbers mean." The bill died in the Senate, but can you imagine if it had passed? Indiana would have been the only place in the universe where circles worked differently. 49. The bug that started it all. Here's a story that every programmer needs to hear. It's September 9th, 1947, and computer scientist Grace Hopper is working on the Harvard Mark II computer when something goes wrong. The machine is acting up, so she opens it up to take a look. And what does she find? An actual moth. Just sitting there, dead, stuck in a relay. Now, people had been calling computer problems bugs for a while, but Grace literally found the first actual bug in a computer. She taped that little moth right into the logbook and wrote, "First actual case of bug being found." That moth is still preserved in the Smithsonian today. Every time your computer crashes, you can thank this one confused moth for giving us the term we still use. 48. When the guillotine met. Star Wars. This one always blows my mind. The last person executed by guillotine in France was killed in 1977, the exact same year Star Wars came out. While people were lining up to see Luke Skywalker fight with lightsabers, France was still using a device invented during the French Revolution to execute people. It's just such a weird collision of old and new. Like, imagine going to see this futuristic space epic and then reading in the newspaper that someone was executed with a 200-year-old machine. France didn't abolish the death penalty until 1981. So for a few years there, you could watch sci-fi movies about the distant future while your country was still using medieval execution methods. 47. The jockey who won from beyond the grave. Sports has seen some incredible comebacks, but this one takes the cake. In 1923, jockey Frank Hayes was riding a horse called Sweet Kiss at Belmont Park when something terrible happened. He had a fatal heart attack right in the middle of the race. But here's the thing. His body stayed perfectly balanced in the saddle. Sweet Kiss kept running, crossed the finish line first, and Frank Hayes was declared the winner. He literally won a horse race while dead. The horse was immediately renamed Sweet Kiss of Death and never raced again. I mean, how do you follow up a performance like that? 46. The general who held a funeral for his leg. Mexican General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was, well, let's just say he had a healthy ego. When he lost his leg in battle in 1838, most people would have just dealt with it privately. Not Santa Anna. He decided his leg deserved a proper send-off. He organized a full state funeral for his amputated limb, complete with parades, speeches, and a fancy glass coffin. The leg was buried with full military honors in Mexico City. Later, when he came back to power, he held an even more elaborate ceremony. Eventually, an angry mob dug up the leg and basically destroyed it. If you want to understand 19th century politics in one story, a state funeral for a body part pretty much covers it. 45. The Lincoln son who kept showing up at assassinations. This story is so eerily coincidental it's almost scary. Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's oldest son, had the worst luck when it came to presidential events. He was there when his father was assassinated in 1865. He was at the train station when President Garfield was shot in 1881. And he was in Buffalo when President McKinley was assassinated in 1901. After the third one, Robert basically said, "Nope, I'm done with presidential events." He started declining invitations, joking that he was bad luck for presidents. Can you imagine being that guy?
Sorry, I can't come to your presidential thing.
44. The grossest home security system ever. If you think modern security systems are complicated, be glad you didn't live in 16th century England. Back then, people were so paranoid about witches that they came up with witch bottles, basically containers filled with urine, hair, nail clippings, and sharp objects like pins or nails. They'd bury these nasty things under their doorsteps or hearths, believing it would protect them from evil spells. Archaeologists are still finding these things under old houses. Imagine buying a charming countryside cottage and finding a 400-year-old bottle of someone's pee under your floorboards. Talk about a unique housewarming gift from the previous owners. 43. When kings thought they could heal people by touch. For centuries, kings in England and France genuinely believed they had magical healing powers. They claimed they could cure scrofula, a type of tuberculosis, just by touching sick people. This wasn't just a side gig. Kings would spend hours every day laying hands on the afflicted.
Child, through the grace of God and the power vested in me, I shall free you from this affliction.
The crazy part? Some people actually got better. Of course, this was probably just coincidence and the placebo effect, but it made for great PR. Nothing says I'm chosen by God to rule, like occasionally curing someone's skin condition with a handshake. The practice continued well into the 1700s, long after doctors knew it was nonsense. 42. Medieval justice was literally trial by fire. Medieval courts had a unique approach to determining guilt. If you want to know if someone's innocent, hurt them and see what happens. In trial by ordeal, accused people would have to stick their hand in boiling water, walk across red-hot metal, or do other painful things.
If you are innocent, God will protect you. Take the iron.
If their wounds healed cleanly after a few days, they were innocent. If not, guilty. It was basically a combination of courtroom drama and extreme physical challenge. The logic was that God would protect the innocent from harm.
Hut! Hut! Hut!
Somehow this seemed like a reasonable justice system at the time. 41. Cleopatra was closer to the moon landing than the pyramids. This fact always messes with my head. Cleopatra lived around 30 BCE, and the Great Pyramid was built around 2560 BCE. That's about 2,500 years between them. But between Cleopatra's death and Neil Armstrong walking on the moon, only about 2,000 years? So Cleopatra was actually closer in time to us watching the moon landing than she was to the pyramids being built. When we think of ancient Egypt, we lump everything together, but the pyramids were already ancient history to Cleopatra. She would have needed a history book to learn about them, just like we do.
I stand here, a queen of the Ptolemies, yet these pyramids were ancient even when my own dynasty was born.
40. The time a mob literally ate their prime minister. This is probably the most horrifying story on this list. In 1672, things were going badly for the Dutch Republic. Military defeats, political chaos, the works. The people needed someone to blame, and they chose the De Witt brothers, Jan, the prime minister, and his brother Cornelis. An angry mob in The Hague didn't just kill them. They mutilated the bodies, hung them upside down, and then, this is the part that's almost too horrible to believe, some people in the crowd actually ate parts of their bodies.
Justice for the Republic!
Hearts, livers, eaten right there on the spot. It's a reminder that even the most civilized societies can descend into absolute chaos when people are desperate and angry enough. 39. The Pope who accidentally caused the plague. In the 1230s, Pope Gregory IX decided that black cats were evil and associated with devil worship. His solution? Kill all the cats. Across Europe, people started exterminating cats en masse because the Pope said they were satanic. Here's the problem: cats eat rats. Rats carry fleas. Fleas spread plague. By wiping out the cat population, Europe accidentally created perfect conditions for the Black Death about a century later. So in trying to fight the devil, the Church may have accidentally helped create one of history's deadliest pandemics. The moral of the story? Don't mess with cats. They're probably the only thing standing between you and the plague. 38. Australia's most embarrassing military defeat. In 1932, Australia went to war with emus. Yes, the large, flightless birds. After World War I, veterans had started farms, but 20,000 emus decided to invade and destroy their crops. The government's solution? Send in the military. Armed with machine guns, soldiers spent weeks trying to kill these birds. They fired thousands of rounds and barely made a dent.
They're too fast!
The emus were fast, smart, and apparently had better tactics than the human army. The operation was declared a failure, and the emus basically won. To this day, the Great Emu War remains one of the most embarrassing military defeats in history. 37. The Soviet Island of Horrors. In 1933, Stalin's government dumped over 6,000 people, mostly petty criminals and undesirable citizens, on a remote island in Siberia called Nazino. No food, no shelter, no tools. Just people on a freezing island with nothing. Within days, people were starving. Within weeks, they were hunting each other. Survivors later told stories of cannibalism, murder, and unimaginable brutality. Guards watched it all happen and did nothing. Over 4,000 people died in less than a month. The Soviet government tried to cover it up, but eventually the truth came out. Nazino Island became a symbol of how cruel bureaucracy can become when it stops seeing people as human. 36. The army that defeated itself. The Austrian army in 1788 managed to pull off what might be the most embarrassing military defeat in history. They defeated themselves. It started when some Austrian scouts crossed a river, bought some schnapps, and came back drunk. When other soldiers saw them, they didn't recognize them and thought they were enemy troops. One thing led to another. Someone fired a shot, and suddenly the entire Austrian army was in full retreat, shooting at each other. Wagons overturned, generals fell off horses, complete chaos. When the actual enemy, the Ottoman Empire, showed up 2 days later, they found the battlefield already covered with wounded Austrians. They didn't have to fight at all. 35. The monk who refused to die. Gregory Rasputin was already known as the Mad Monk, who had way too much influence over the Russian royal family. By 1916, some nobles decided he had to go. But killing Rasputin turned out to be harder than anyone expected. First, they invited him to dinner and poisoned his food with cyanide. Didn't work. So they shot him multiple times.
Why? Won't he die?
Still alive. He actually tried to escape, so they shot him again. Still not dead. They beat him up, tied him up, and threw him in an icy river. The autopsy suggested he might have still been alive when he hit the water. It's like something out of a horror movie. This guy just would not die. 34. The prisoner who survived a volcano. On May 8, 1902, Mount Pelée erupted on the Caribbean island of Martinique. The city of Saint-Pierre was completely destroyed in minutes. A superheated cloud of gas and ash killed nearly 30,000 people instantly. But there was one survivor, a man named Lugger Silbaris. He was locked in a stone jail cell for being drunk and disorderly. That thick-walled cell with just a small window somehow protected him from the heat and toxic gases that killed everyone else.
If this cell is my coffin, then why am I...
Rescuers found him days later, badly burned but alive. He later joined Barnum and Bailey Circus as the man who lived through Doomsday. Sometimes being in jail at the right time saves your life. 33. Cleveland's balloon disaster. In 1986, Cleveland thought it would be fun to break a world record by releasing 1.5 million balloons at once. It was supposed to be a cheerful publicity stunt. Instead, it turned into a complete disaster. A cold front moved in, and instead of floating away, the balloons came back down, covering the city and Lake Erie. Roads were blocked, airports shut down, and emergency services couldn't function. Worst of all, 2 fishermen were missing. But the Coast Guard couldn't find them because the lake was covered with balloons that looked like heads bobbing in the water.
Shut it down! This is a catastrophe!
Both men drowned. The city got sued and became a national laughingstock. Sometimes good intentions really do pave the road to hell. 32. The man they couldn't execute. In 1885, John Babacombe Lee was sentenced to hang for murder in England. But when execution day came, something weird happened. The trapdoor wouldn't open. They tried again. Still wouldn't work. They tried a third time. Nothing. The officials were baffled. They tested the mechanism between attempts, and it worked fine. But the moment they put Lee on it, it jammed. After 3 failed attempts, they gave up and commuted his sentence to life in prison. Lee insisted he was innocent, and many people took the mechanical failures as a sign from God. He was eventually released in 1907. The story of the man they couldn't hang became a Victorian sensation. 31. The saint who told jokes while being executed. St. Lawrence was a 3rd century Christian who was sentenced to be roasted alive on a gridiron. According to legend, as he was being burned to death, he looked at his executioners and said, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side."
Turn me over, this side's done enough.
Whether this actually happened or not, the story has survived for almost 2,000 years. Lawrence became the patron saint of cooks, comedians, and, somewhat ironically, firefighters. If you're ever having a really bad day, just remember St. Lawrence faced literal fire with a punchline. 30. The day Boston drowned in syrup. January 15, 1919 started like any other day in Boston. Then a massive storage tank burst, releasing over 2 million gallons of molasses into the streets.
Run! It's a flood of molasses!
A 25-foot wave of sticky syrup rushed through the north end at 35 miles per hour. Buildings were destroyed, train cars flipped over, and 21 people died. Witnesses said you could smell the sweetness for weeks afterward. The tank had been poorly constructed and couldn't handle the pressure. For decades, people claimed that on hot summer days you could still smell molasses rising from the cobblestones. It's probably the only natural disaster in history that smelled delicious. 29. Oregon's exploding whale. In 1970, Oregon highway officials faced a problem. How do you get rid of a massive dead whale that's washed up on the beach? Their solution was ambitious. They decided to blow it up with dynamite, figuring the explosion would scatter the pieces for scavengers to clean up. Instead, it launched 8 tons of whale blubber into the sky. Chunks of whale rained down on spectators and completely crushed a car parked a quarter-mile away. The whole thing was filmed and the footage became legendary. Oregon has since passed laws about how to deal with beached whales, hopefully involving fewer explosions. '28. Prague's unique approach to politics. In Prague, political disagreements had a tendency to end with people getting thrown out of windows. The most famous Defenestration of Prague happened in 1618, when Protestant nobles literally threw two Catholic officials and their secretary out of a third-story window. Miraculously, all three survived, either because they landed in a pile of manure or because God protected them, depending on who you ask.
This is how we settle politics in Prague. This is how we settle politics in...
But this window-throwing incident helped start the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history. In Prague, apparently, diplomacy meant having a strong throwing arm. 27. The CIA's worst spy recruitment ever. During the Cold War, the CIA had some pretty creative ideas. One of their weirdest was Operation Acoustic Kitty. They wanted to turn cats into spies. The plan was to surgically implant a microphone and radio transmitter into a cat so it could eavesdrop on Soviet conversations. The first field test was a complete disaster. They released their high-tech spy cat near a Soviet compound, and it immediately wandered into traffic and got hit by a taxi. Millions of dollars and years of research ended by a taxicab. The program was scrapped. Turns out cats are terrible spies. They're too independent, easily distracted, and have no interest in following orders.
Next time, maybe we try dogs.
26. The man who could eat anything. Tarare was an 18th century Frenchman with the most bizarre medical condition ever recorded. He was constantly insatiably hungry. We're talking about a man who could eat a quarter of a cow in one sitting, along with live animals, garbage, and allegedly even a toddler. Doctors studied him extensively but couldn't figure out what was wrong. The French army actually used him as a courier. They'd have him swallow documents, and he'd pass them through his digestive system behind enemy lines. He died young, probably from complications related to his condition. Tarare remains one of the strangest medical mysteries in history.
Mon Dieu, how can one man eat like that?
5. The war that started over potatoes. In 1859, the United States and Britain nearly went to war over a pig. It started when a British settler's pig wandered into an American farmer's garden on San Juan Island and ate his potatoes. The American farmer shot the pig. This escalated quickly. Both countries sent troops, warships showed up, and for a while it looked like there might be a real war. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, and the whole thing was settled through arbitration. The United States got the island, and the only casualty was the pig. It's called the Pig War, and it's a reminder of how close we can come to violence over the most ridiculous things. '24. San Francisco's beloved. Fake Emperor. In 1859, Joshua Abraham Norton declared himself Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. He was clearly mentally ill, but the people of San Francisco decided to play along. Norton issued royal decrees, like dissolving Congress, printed his own currency that local businesses actually accepted, and even inspected city infrastructure. When he died in 1880, over 10,000 people attended his funeral. He never had any real power, but he became a beloved local character. Emperor Norton represents something beautiful about humanity. Sometimes a community's kindness can turn one person's delusion into everyone's shared joy. '23. The historian who thinks we're living in the wrong century. In the 1990s, a German historian named Heribert Illig proposed that we're actually living in the 18th century because 297 years of history, from 614 to 911 AD, never happened. According to his theory, Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II invented those years to make Otto's reign seem more legitimate. The theory has been thoroughly debunked by other historians, but it's fascinating to think about. How do we really know what year it is? The phantom time hypothesis is probably wrong, but it raises interesting questions about how we understand history and time. 22. Medieval Parliament's bird problem. In 1327, King Edward II had to issue a decree forbidding people from bringing hawks into Parliament. Why? Because members of the House of Lords were using trained falcons to hunt pigeons inside the building during sessions. Medieval Parliament was already noisy and chaotic, but add hunting birds to the mix and you've got complete mayhem. The image of government debates being interrupted by someone's falcon diving after a pigeon is just perfect. It shows that even in the supposedly dignified halls of power, people were still just people doing ridiculous things. '21. The Hitler who fought against Hitler. William Patrick Hitler was Adolf Hitler's British-born nephew. He had a complicated relationship with his infamous uncle. He even tried to use the Hitler name to get jobs in Germany before things got really bad. But when World War II started, he fled to America. Once in the US, he became a citizen and joined the Navy to fight against Nazi Germany. After the war, he changed his last name and disappeared into suburban obscurity on Long Island. It's one of history's strangest ironies, a Hitler who fought against Hitler and lived to tell about it. 20. Ancient athletes and their disgusting health drinks. Roman gladiators were surprisingly health-conscious, but their post-workout drinks were absolutely disgusting. They would mix plant ash with vinegar to create a recovery drink that provided calcium and minerals to help their bones heal after fights. Recent archaeological evidence confirms that gladiators actually drank this nasty concoction regularly. They were also mostly vegetarian, living on grains and legumes rather than meat. So these tough fighters were basically ancient vegans chugging grimy mineral smoothies. It's like CrossFit, but with more Mortal Kombat and worse-tasting protein shakes. 19. The Pope who quit and disappeared. In 1294, Pope Celestine V became one of the few popes to voluntarily resign. He was a hermit by nature and found running the Catholic Church overwhelming. After just 5 months, he issued a decree making it legal for popes to resign, then immediately did so. But his successor, Pope Boniface VIII, didn't trust him to stay retired. Celestine was imprisoned in a remote castle where he later died. Some believe he was murdered. Dante even put him in hell in the Divine Comedy for his cowardice. Sometimes quitting your job has consequences you never expected. '18. Napoleon's ultimate power move. When Napoleon was crowned Emperor of the French in 1804, Pope Pius VII was there to perform the traditional coronation ceremony. But Napoleon had other plans. At the crucial moment, he took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. It was a calculated snub to papal authority. Napoleon was saying his power came from himself, not from the church. The Pope just stood there awkwardly while Napoleon made his point. It perfectly captures Napoleon's personality, dramatic, calculated, and absolutely unwilling to share the spotlight. 17. Paraguay's dynasty of disaster. Paraguay had 3 leaders in the 19th century who were all related and all completely insane. First was José Gaspar Rodríguez de Francia, who declared himself supreme dictator for life and banned marriages between Paraguayans and Spaniards. His successor was Carlos Antonio López, who continued the isolation policy. Then came López's son, Francisco Solano López, who led Paraguay into the catastrophic War of the Triple Alliance. By the end of that war, Paraguay had lost 60 to 70% of its male population. 3 generations of the same family basically destroyed an entire country. 16. When royal inbreeding went too far. European royal families spent centuries marrying their cousins to keep bloodlines pure. The Habsburg family took this to an extreme, and the result was the Habsburg jaw, a severely deformed lower jaw that made eating and speaking difficult. The condition reached its peak with Charles II of Spain, who could barely chew food and reportedly drooled constantly. His family tree was so tangled with inbreeding that it looked more like a wreath. He was physically and mentally disabled, and when he died without an heir, it plunged Europe into war. Genetics doesn't care about royal blood. "15. The rooster that was burned for witchcraft. In 1474, the Swiss town of Basel put a rooster on trial for witchcraft. The rooster's crime? It had laid an egg. Since only female chickens are supposed to lay eggs, the authorities concluded the rooster must be practicing dark magic. They were particularly worried because they believed the egg might hatch a basilisk, a mythical creature so deadly it could kill you just by looking at you. The court found the rooster guilty and sentenced it to be burned at the stake. The trial was well documented and shows how seriously medieval people took their superstitions. 14. The Vatican's most scandalous party. In 1501, Pope Alexander VI and his son Cesare Borgia reportedly threw a party at the Vatican that would make today's celebrities blush. The banquet of chestnuts featured 50 courtesans who danced naked while chestnuts were scattered on the floor. The evening turned into a sexual competition, with prizes awarded for various acts of stamina. While some historians debate the more salacious details, the story has endured as a symbol of Renaissance papal corruption. It's definitely not the kind of Vatican event you'd see on the evening news today. 13. Viking warriors' performance-enhancing drugs. Viking berserkers were legendary for their battle rage. They'd fight in a trance-like fury that made them seem superhuman. But they might have had chemical help. Some historians believe they consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms or other psychoactive substances before battle. These drugs would have heightened their aggression and dulled their pain, making them feel invincible. Whether it was mushrooms or just psychological conditioning, berserkers terrified their enemies. If you saw a warrior charging at you, screaming and foaming at the mouth, you'd probably run too. 12. The smell that stopped government. In the summer of 1858, London experienced a heat wave that made the Thames River smell so bad, it actually halted government business. The river was full of raw sewage, and the stench was so overwhelming that lawmakers tried hanging lime-soaked curtains over their windows. The Great Stink, as it came to be known, finally forced politicians to do something about London's sanitation. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette designed a new sewer system that revolutionized public health. Sometimes it takes a truly horrible smell to get politicians to act. 11. When the government secretly drugged its own citizens. From the 1950s to the 1970s, the CIA ran a program called MK Ultra that tested LSD on unknowing American and Canadian citizens. They dosed soldiers, mental patients, and random civilians to study mind control and interrogation techniques. Many victims suffered permanent psychological damage and some died. The program was eventually exposed and shut down, but most of the records were deliberately destroyed. It's one of the darkest chapters in intelligence history. Imagine being randomly drugged with LSD by your own government, all in the name of national security. 10. The day Napoleon was defeated by rabbits. After signing the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807, Napoleon decided to celebrate with a rabbit hunt for his officers. His staff was supposed to gather wild rabbits for the event, but they accidentally collected tame, farm-raised rabbits instead. When the cages were opened, the rabbits didn't run away. They charged straight at the humans, thinking they were about to be fed. Napoleon and his officers were chased around by hundreds of hungry rabbits. No shots were fired, no one was hurt, but the Emperor of France was definitely defeated by a fluffy army of farm animals. 9. The astronomer with a metal nose and a drunk moose. Tycho Brahe was a brilliant Danish astronomer who lost part of his nose in a duel over a math problem. For the rest of his life, he wore a prosthetic nose made of brass, though rumors said it was gold or silver. But that's not even the weirdest part about Brahe. He kept a pet moose that he brought to dinner parties. The moose died after getting drunk on beer and falling downstairs. Brahe also employed a clairvoyant dwarf as his assistant. Despite all this eccentricity, he made crucial astronomical observations that helped Kepler develop his laws of planetary motion. 8. The town that danced itself to death. In July 1518, a woman in Strasbourg began dancing uncontrollably in the streets. Soon, dozens of people joined her, and they couldn't stop. They danced for days, some for weeks, without rest. Many collapsed from exhaustion, and several died. The authorities' solution? They hired musicians to help cure the dancers by encouraging even more dancing. Historians still debate what caused it: mass hysteria, ergot poisoning from moldy grain, or stress-induced psychosis. Whatever the cause, it's the only time in history where dancing was literally a matter of life and death. 7. The time America sent fighter jets to cut down a tree. In 1976, North Korean soldiers killed 2 American soldiers with axes in the Korean DMZ. The U.S. response was called Operation Paul Bunyan, and it was both terrifying and absurd. To cut down a single tree, America deployed hundreds of troops, helicopters, bombers, and fighter jets. It was massive overkill designed to send a message that such attacks wouldn't be tolerated. The operation was successful, the tree was cut down, and no shots were fired. But it remains one of the most militarized landscaping operations in world history. 6. The train car that witnessed both world wars. World War I officially ended when Germany signed an armistice in a railway car in the French forest of Compiègne in 1918. 22 years later, Adolf Hitler forced the French to sign their surrender in the exact same train car, in the exact same location. It was Hitler's revenge for Germany's humiliation in the First War. Afterward, he ordered the historic train car destroyed so no one could ever reverse the humiliation again. The car became a symbol of how European power shifted between the wars, from German defeat to German victory, all in the same railway carriage. 5. The teenager who fought Nazis with flirtation and a bicycle. In 1942, 16-year-old Freddie Overstegen joined the Dutch resistance with her sister and best friend. Their tactics were unconventional and deadly. Freddie would flirt with Nazi soldiers in bars, lure them into the woods, and then kill them. But it wasn't all espionage and assassination. Freddie also used her bicycle to transport weapons and deliver messages. Once, she escaped capture by riding straight through a German checkpoint. Her story shows that resistance doesn't always need an army. Sometimes it just needs a brave teenager with a bike. 4. The Pope who put a corpse on trial. Pope Stephen VI had serious issues with his predecessor, Pope Formosus. So in 897, he decided to put him on trial. The problem? Formosus was dead. Stephen's solution was to dig up the corpse, dress it in papal robes, and prop it up on a throne. The cadaver synod was as grotesque as it sounds. Stephen accused the rotting corpse of various crimes, found it guilty, shocking, and had it stripped, mutilated, and thrown in the Tiber River. The whole spectacle horrified Rome and led to Stephen's own downfall. If you think today's politics are ugly, at least nobody's dragging corpses into court. 3. The Nazi who might have hidden in a bathroom. After World War II, many high-ranking Nazis went into hiding, but Heinrich Müller, head of the Gestapo, simply vanished. Decades later, a Soviet source claimed Müller was found in Berlin trying to escape by hiding in a public toilet. The story goes that he was caught in a bathroom stall with false documents, though some say he shot himself before capture. No conclusive evidence was ever found, and his body was never recovered. Whether true or not, the idea of one of history's most feared men hiding in a bathroom stall is both pathetic and fitting. 2. The parrot that still hates Nazis. Winston Churchill supposedly owned a blue and yellow macaw named Charlie, who was trained to scream profanities about Adolf Hitler. According to legend, decades after Churchill's death, the parrot was still living in a pet shop in Surrey, still cursing the memory of the Third Reich. Some historians question whether the story is true, but it's too good not to believe. The idea of a swearing parrot as a living relic of World War II is just perfect. Somewhere out there might be a bird that's still holding a grudge against fascism. 1. The 335-Year War. Nobody noticed. The Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896 lasted only 38 minutes, making it the shortest war in history. But the longest war? The Netherlands was technically at war with the Isles of Scilly, tiny islands off Cornwall, from 1651 to 1986, 335 years. No battles were fought, no shots were fired, and everyone forgot the war existed until a historian stumbled across it in the 1980s. The two sides finally signed a peace treaty just to clean up the paperwork. It's the perfect example of how sometimes wars don't end with a bang. They end with someone finally getting around to filing the right forms. And there you have it, 50 of the strangest, most ridiculous, and most wonderful stories from human history. These aren't just random facts, they're reminders that history is full of real people doing unbelievable things, making terrible decisions, and sometimes just getting really unlucky. The past wasn't just kings and battles and important dates. It was full of people like us, trying to figure things out, making mistakes, and occasionally doing something so bizarre that we're still talking about it centuries later. And honestly, I think that makes history way more interesting than any textbook ever could. What's your favorite weird historical story? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove reality is stranger than fiction.